I remember saying to him, I don't feel ready yet. And I, you know that I need some sort of income. Please help me see the way or show me what I need to do. But I need you to come through because I'm not sure what I'm doing and this and that. I remember it being around my birthday, and I remember talking to a friend of mine at the time, and her, asking me, well, would you like me to send you opportunities and things like that? I can send them your way, and you can look at them and apply. And I was like, yes, thank you, that would be helpful. And I remember it was either that same day or the very next day, my manager from my job where I was laid off from. I think I was laid off twice during the pandemic, and she had um, reached out to me and let me know that a friend of mine who was also a coworker had they had given her my old position, but things had happened and they hadn't quite worked out, and they were asking me to come back to my old position. And
Wow.
this is, I never thought that that would have happened or anything. I hadn't heard. It was completely out of my mind. I wasn't thinking I wanted my old job back or anything like that. Um, I just wanted some means of income where I could do what was showing me to do at the same time as have something kind of stable to lean back on.
Mm.
And she just ended up, I feel like it was the very next day, she ended up calling me and asking me. And the person I had talked to about this did not know my manager. So there was no way that, you know, and
Wow.
I hadn't talked to her in months at that time. So I was like, Lord, you're amazing. And so I ended up being brought back on for more than I was previously making. I
Wow.
was working part time, and I was like, "Oh my God, only you could do something like that." It didn't mean that there wasn't a lot of warfare, but I mean, from the minute that I took that position, there was warfare.
Mm.
When I first took that position back in 2018, so it didn't mean that there weren't times that I wanted to pull my hair out or things like that, but God was constantly showing up in all of these different areas of my life. So him doing that, I was like, I was praising him the house down, like when he opened that door.
That's amazing. So no,
Yeah.
obviously, the enemy is annoyed that you're having these blessings from God because He's the one that's truly opening those doors up, and
Right.
not only that, just an abundance of it as well. So,
Mhm.
talk to me, Candace. Like when you're going through that, now you're at that job, you're praising the Lord. Tell me about some of that spiritual warfare that you're dealing with. What was one of the moments for at least for you that was a defining moment that you said, "Oh, this I gotta rebuke this."
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't realize, like, I knew it was spiritual warfare looking back at that
Mm,
job, but I didn't really I knew it was spiritual warfare, but I didn't know how to combat it until I
mm,
went to the next job that he blessed me with. Um, so it was kind of turned up. The heat was kind of turned up when I went back to that job. I He ended up opening a door for me at the following nonprofit that I would go to work at, and the heat was completely turned up there. And I think one of the times that I realized that it was spiritual warfare was it was just something that was things that were happening that were unmistakable, that it felt as though I was being blamed for, kind of put on trial for, even though it's, those kind of feelings, and it had nothing to do with me because I was completely new coming into that role, and it was coming the animosity or those negative feelings were kind of coming from the person who had my position prior to that. And
mm,
that was something that I greatly experienced in the role that I had previous to that. And it, was turned up in the next job that I was at. And just all kinds of things happening, survey, like monitoring spirits and, people just
mm,
following me around and things like that at that job, and a lot of oppression and racism, but they were really portals for the enemy. They were. I started to see it more as the spiritual warfare that I was supposed to see it as, the spirit behind the person that was being used. And when I understood that I did not have the skills or the knowledge that I needed to understand this. It found me. I think I had signed up for some kind of email list or something like that, and I remember it's called Made of Still, Still, and it's a Christian. I guess you might call it a blog, but it had everything I needed for spiritual warfare, 101s or like 105. Like, I mean, and all of the prayers. And one of the first things that I learned was that you have to pray for the people who are setting themselves up as your enemies, who are
Mhm.
positioning themselves against you in this warfare. And that was something that really shifted my thinking, because I was like, God, you want me to pray for this? Because David, he was very vocal praying for his enemies in the psalm. Like he was not praying what you're asking me to pray. But then I started to realize, you know, these are people who are being used, who are open
Yeah.
to be used by the enemy in one way or another, whether they are believers, whether they're Christians or not. In one way or another, there's a part of them, their mind, body, spirit, heart, that's being controlled by the enemy to, set itself up in opposition, which makes them an enemy towards me, but really they're an enemy towards God, whether they know that or not.
That's right.
And, it's not to say, oh, holier than anything, but it's something that we really as Christians have to remember, that it's God who's fighting the battle, not us. And because they're setting themselves up against us, they don't really realize they're coming up against the God of heaven and earth, and we really have to pray for his mercy for those people, because they are setting themselves up in a battle that they cannot win. And, if they don't repent, if they don't turn away from what they're doing, they're going to come under judgment. And that judgment could mean the finality, it could mean death. So we have to pray for these people, even though they're attacking us, even though, you know, they have their heart and mind set on doing some kind of trouble, even harming you, we still have to pray for them. And that really, I would say it definitely ups my game in terms of prayer, and elevating my thinking the way that Christ asks us to, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And Candace, about that spiritual warfare, I mean, that is absolutely 100% the reality that we all face, and it's really the what's behind the person is the spirit that's controlling them, whether it's the spirit of God or if it's the spirit of the Antichrist. There's always some kind of spirits at play, and they're always tugging at different strings because they ultimately wanted to see the demise of everybody, not including ourselves, but they're trying to take everybody down with them when they go out into that great judgment for the lake of fire. So we prayer against the enemy, but for the enemy is the biggest blessing from the Lord, because that is essentially the bow and arrow, if you will, of what we can have in the spirit.
yeah,
And I've seen mighty works in that as well. So so Candace, I 100% understand that. But that's just the reality that we're going to see even more of an uptick in these last of days. And I think there's a number of folks now coming around, in especially in the states where we're seeing more of a revival, and I think that that's a theme that we're going to continue to see, and
yeah,
then maybe there's going to be a falling away at the end, but I don't know. But right now it's just a very interesting time, and we're seeing a lot of the tools of the enemy at play, but we're also seeing a lot of the gifts of the Lord coming through, and that's just a beautiful thing. And I see the body really is coming together to understand the spiritual side. It's not just a walk of understanding who God is in the Bible, but taking the Bible's words at face value and then applying that in the spirit. And
right.
that's really the big differentiator that we're starting to see now, Candace. And more Christians are equipped with their bow and arrow in the spirit.